Hi everyone. Um, for some of you who are listening to me for the first time, I'd just like to say this is not my first video. I've done a couple of them with narcissistic parents, but I think the time has come for you to hear my story. This may not be the great story, or I'm not, you don't see me with my makeup. I am homeless. I live in my car. But I have the hell of the story to tell. And the reason the whole thing has pushed me to do this, because I want you to understand there are some really strange things have been happening to me for the past few years, last year and a half especially. And you know, when people say they have a feeling they have been followed or poisoned or whatever, it's all on point. And I'm gonna get to this as soon as I tell the truth about my parents. And I'm sorry, I'm very loose, sort of, my thoughts are very loose. It's because I've been poisoned so many times over the year, actually over the past few years. And at the beginning I didn't know why. When I went off to travel, the abuse has followed me. And I figured, and I observed people, and there's no way strange people whom I met for the first time, who has seen me for the first time, would react to a stranger the way they did. Okay? I was perra. Anyone who speaks Spanish or understands Spanish know what that means. Basically, I was Cheyenne in French, is whore. I was a bitch. I was, why the fuck did you have to come here? And all amongst all other things. But before I tell that story, I would like to continue what my parents are like, so you understand what sort of environment I come from. I'm probably gonna slip into telling stuff what's happening to me health-wise. I've been poisoned with nerve gas, which disables the muscles, consequently disables the heart. What they're trying to do is cause me a heart attack. Okay, that's why I don't want to strain myself too much, but I feel it's time for me to be vocal now, because I don't know whether I'm still going to be able to be vocal, and I think it's time for the world to know this and to recognize the pattern in anyone they're in relation to. Any narcissistic person. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the story, and the facts behind the story mean the facts. Okay, so anything I say in this video represents the fact. It's not a made-up story or anything made up. The story only represents consecutive events in my life. So I'm going to start at the beginning. The first memory I can remember is my, at the time, friend, who was I was about 3 years old, and Marco, I think he was about 4 years old, and he died. And the first memory I can remember is me standing by his coffin, which was raised. I couldn't see him, and I remember everyone crying, and I didn't understand why. And I was trying to climb I was lifting myself on my toes, and I was trying to see who it was, and I was trying to see where Marco is. So at some point, this elderly lady came by, and she asked me what I was doing, and I said, I want to see Marco, in Slovenian, of course. And she says, Marco is gone. And I asked her, where did he go? And she started crying. And I didn't understand why she was crying. I thought, if he went somewhere, why doesn't somebody tell me? And then she says, he's gone far, far away. And then she continued crying. And that's my first memory. That was my first friend. I'm sorry for this. I will get like this, It's one of the strange memories. I have pictures of him. And if he was a grown-up man, he'd be so handsome and beautiful. And if he hears me now, I love you, darling. I never stop thinking about you. So that was my first memory. The reason I'm telling you this, obviously it made a quite emotional impact on me. And we start remembering things. We remember things that make a great emotional impact on us. So, sorry, my heart is racing so hard. So I'm trying to figure out why none of my parents would ever say anything about this event. They never explained death to me, otherwise I would have remembered. It's the sort of thing a child remembers. If I remembered this scene, I would remember my parents telling me this. They never ever explained. When I was growing up, they also told me stories about me. Like, I was born literally without hair. I only had a little bit hair on the top of my head, just a little bit. It was really white. It was snow white. And I still have very little eyebrows, and to this day, I don't have any eyelashes. Okay? And I had very bad teeth. At the time was still good, but as the years progressed, they were just really, really bad teeth. Sorry, where was I? So my parents never explained things to me, and as I grew up, they told really strange stories. So I'm thinking, like, they told stories about, when I asked questions about my hair, they would say things like, an elderly babysitter who looked after you, she slapped you with a... It sounds so crazy, but that's what they told me. She slapped me, allegedly, she slapped me with, gosh, what's the plant? It's the plant for kidneys, Kopriva. Kopriva. Look under translation, Slovenian Kopriva, and then have it translated in English. Okay, that's the best thing, because right now I'm in such a bad state, I can't even remember the name of the plant. So basically, she says it's basically a plant which it stings. If you slap yourself, even if you touch it, it will give you a rash. Okay, and it stings like hell. So you probably have an idea what it is now. So basically, that lady was hitting me with that herb on my head. That's why I don't grow any hair. That's one of the stories they told me, which consequently, when I was growing up, when I was in school, I told other kids, because they would ask me why I had so little hair, if I was ill or anything. And I told the kids, and obviously the kids told, sorry, I'm going to do all the things that, women don't want you to see, and I'm doing all that in front of you. So just for you to see I'm human. So the kids told the parents, and obviously the parents thought I was lying. And there were lots of instances that parents would tell me, like for instance, they told me a story when I was 2 years old. They told me a story that when we lived in a basement, they told me that I once woke up, pushed one of the chairs towards a small window when we were in basement. I would climb up through the window and start wandering streets around the house. So my parents, they said they went berserk looking for me. But if I tell these stories to other people, I can actually see now how crazy this sounds. A 2-year-old climbing a chair through a window, wandering streets. Either they were telling bonkers, they were telling porkies, or I sensed from a very early age that this is not my family where I should live. These are not the people I should stay with. Either this or either that. Now it's your decision. Or I don't know. My parents may approach me and tell me whether this was true or not. I was just telling the story to other people. So all these really, really strange stories may have given the impression that I was lying, but I was told these stories from my parents. Okay. This actually, if they were lying to me, I was consequently unknowingly lying to other people, and other people would create an opinion of me that I'm a liar, which I'm not. The funny thing is, I don't know much about my parents. Throughout my childhood, I would ask them questions, and they would be very, very secretive what their lives were when they were kids, because I remember asking them frequently about their lives, and they would always try to sort of elegantly push me away. I remember my dad telling me that they would catch small animals and they would dissect them. He especially talked about frogs, and I remember feeling sick listening to these stories, and I just didn't want him to continue. And I remember him having a dog called Laika, and just how he played tricks on the dog, which I think it was horrible. And I don't remember him say, like, I really love that dog, I'm so sorry. He never shed a tear about that dog. That's all I know about my dad while growing up. That's all I know. And that he had 2 brothers, which obviously I met throughout my childhood. That's all I know. I really don't know one more thing. The other thing I know about my mother, she had very strict parents. They would usually beat her for not doing stuff. She was raised very like you belong behind a stove. Very, women are the slaves of men. And she raised me that way. She taught me how to cook. I was cooking the whole meal for my primary family at the age of 12. And when serving the food, I would always prepare the table and napkins, and I would make it look really pretty. And all I got was maybe thank you here and then, but mostly, oh, this soup lacks salt, this is not done enough, this is blah blah. Critics, all the time critics. I was never good enough. Okay, never, regardless of my age. Or I was never good enough, or I was never old enough. So I was never allowed to do things for those two reasons. Never good enough, never old enough. So I remember my one time posing a question to my mother. I said, look, I'm never good enough, but I'm never old enough. So which one do you want me to be? And I remember this now. I'm thinking, her being really confused and saying, oh, you're so fucking intelligent, just go away or something. She got really upset by me. Okay, going back, when I was about, I must have been around 5 years old. I remember looking at my hand. If you look your hand closely, your skin compounds of really, really small particles. And I remember looking at those particles and, they looked very fascinated. And I asked my mom in front of, I remember being out one day with her friends. I remember asking her in front of them, what were those little things on my skin? And she was like, ah, and she slapped me on my wrist. Oh, that's nothing. And she kind of apologized to her friends for me being too naggy. What the fuck? Okay? Every mother would be glad for a kid to ask questions. No, not my mother. Okay? She fed me, she put me to bed, that's it. And also what I noticed throughout the childhood, that I would, sorry, there's a sun here coming through. I would also notice that I had a brother, I still have a brother, slightly over a year and a half older, 18 months older than me. And my mother would, what's the word? Sorry. My mother he would smug him to death with hugs and things for him. He was a golden child. To me, not so much. She would just smother him with kisses and hugs, and he was a typical mama's boy. He still is to this day. Hi, darling. I know he's watching this, or he will be. So, yes, so he got smothered with kisses and cuddles, and you know what I would do when my mother tried to hug me? I would push her away. However, before you judge me, I ask you one question. What child who craves love and affection would push his own parent away? Insecure child. I didn't, at very young age, I didn't feel secure with my parents. Okay, at the time I was showing that I couldn't the symptoms of that I can't trust my parents. It's subconscious that works on your behavior. Excuse me. And that subconscious, and that which turned into conscious later in life, turned into Okay, so where was I? So while growing up, I didn't hug my parents. My dad. There's another incident in my life that made a huge impact on me. I remember my parents arguing from an early age, from about 4 years, and I'm 47 now. So they would argue all the time, and I would always feel guilty, as children do, because we as kids didn't understand that this is the grown-up thing, not a child thing. And they never explained to me that it's not our fault. They never explained that to me. And I remember one day my dad arguing with my mother, and I would I would stand in front of the knee of my mum, and he would threaten to leave her. And he would shout at her, and she was crying, and she would tell him to bugger off and that sort of stuff. So he goes through the door and slams his door, and I actually believed I would never see him again. And I remember start crying. I cry because this was psychological abuse. They never took children into account with what they were doing. They would never close the doors. They would do everything they did in front of me and my brother, okay? And I cry because they damaged this child that is okay within me now. They damaged him. And I'm going to tell you what happened to that child later. So he does that. Obviously he came back, but at the time I remember this so vividly. They threatened. Okay, there was another instance how my parents were aggressive, my father especially. I actually believe my mother was a good person. I actually believe that. Whereas my dad, no. He had a witch mother. A witch. She was... I will tell you about her later. I do hope I remember. But let me just give you a hint. Only about 10 years ago, he said to me, Tay, I'm thankful for my mother beating me so hard, so she injected the discipline within me, because that is the only way she was able to inject the discipline. He was actually thankful to his mother because she beat him so hard, and that's the only way the discipline stopped with him. That is so fucking sad. And you know how old was he at the time? About 60. He was grateful to her. That is not normal. That is so not normal. So let me tell you another incident. My brother was kind of... I was more of a mellow kid, you know. I was 2 years older. I was looking after my brother. I would take him to a kindergarten when he was 4 and I was 6, and my school and his kindergarten were close enough that I would see him walk another about 300 meters along that road. He turned left, and then he crossed the road, and then I would see him going into the kindergarten. And I would stand on the same spot every day to see my brother walk another 10 minutes to get to the kindergarten until he entered the kindergarten. Regardless of whether I was late, whether everybody will call me, even the teacher, I wanted to make sure that my brother got into the kindergarten safe. And I did that with my pleasure. I look after my little brother like my own soul. He was my everything at the time. But also, at about 4 years old, he started being really naughty. he would steal money from mum's purse. And one day he stole, at the time it was about 100 dinars. I can't even put it into today's money because it was so then money. It's like stealing 100 euros or it was that sort of money at the time. Okay, and my dad suspected who stole the money because my mom would go crazy, like 100 dinars is missing, make it all crazy. And my dad went into a sweets shop and would find my brother there. He will tell this later. He found my brother paying, which is really funny because that's my brother. He would be paying cakes for everyone, all his friends. God bless him, and he would be paying cakes for everyone, and he was obviously given a change as well. I think the cake master would did some of the money into his pocket as well. But he would buy cakes for everyone. So, but and this is the saddest part. Okay, Dad would drag him home. Me and my mother would stand in a living room. Okay, we lived in a 1-bedroom apartment for 2 adults and 2 kids lying on a bed at the same time. We were quite poor, obviously, and we lived in council flats, I think. And so my dad brings my brother home, starts shouting at 4-year-old. At 4-year-old, he starts shouting like crazy. And then he would lift the poor kid up with one hand, with his tiny little hand around the wrist. He would lift him up above the ground. He was like a meter above the ground, okay? With one hand. And he would just hit like a boxing bag. He would just hit him like anywhere it would fall. And he started, poor thing, he would start screaming. And my mother didn't even say a word, don't stop, don't do this. She would just pull me out of the room, and everything I could hear was his screams. And he would beat this kid up senseless. He would beat him up senseless. I would never forgive my father for doing this, because he beat my brother more than he beat me. And the reason I'm saying this is because when I came back from London after 14 years living in London, where I went to rebuild my own persona, because it was so damaged, I had to go somewhere. So when I came back home, my brother being grown-up man, my brother would go to parties a lot, and I would hear him about 2 o'clock in the morning stomping into the house, and he would go straight to where my father slept, in his bedroom, and he would beat him up. And when I saw that, I couldn't believe this was really happening. I couldn't believe it. But when I thought about it, it makes sense, because my dad would beat him up so much. It was ridiculous. He was still a mummy's boy, but my dad beat him up because he wasn't like my dad wanted him to be. So that was one of the really horrible things that my dad has done to my brother. And another things that they did, which I will never forgive him for that. I will never ever. This is another really horrible memory. And I want you to know this, because when you have a narcissistic parents, or which my father is definitely, and my mother is codependent, obviously, you have so much trauma. I've dealt with the trauma, don't get me wrong, but when you remember things like that, you can't help but feeling emotional because you can't get through life. I learned how to deal with that stuff, but you can't go through life not being emotional, remembering those things. So what my father did was, when I was about 12 years old, my brother was 10, and I wanted to have a puppy. We had a huge house. We had a huge fucking house. It was like 300 square meters, for fuck's sake, you know? And we had lots of, about 500 land around it, with fruit garden and vegetable garden and the swing and everything, you know? It's just, and next to the house there was this huge field of really nice, beautiful grass. So I once went, I got permission from my parents, and I once went to this house where I heard somebody was giving away puppies, and I was 12, and I hitchhiked. I had to hitchhike. Okay, nobody would take me. Nobody would go give me a ride. I had to hitchhike about 40 kilometers. Okay, so I hitchhiked. And I remember getting to the place, and I said, you know, I was circling the house, and this man came out, and I said, and he asked me what I was looking, and I said, I heard you have puppies to give away, and he said, well, we've given all the puppies away, and then this puppy comes along, and he says he's the only one that he's, you know, he stayed, he's staying here. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, but I really like to have a puppy. And, you know, puppy was so happy to see me, and he would jump up and down on me, and it was an instant connection. So, in the end, he let me keep the puppy. And I love that puppy so much. I would name him Muri. But the way my parents raised me, I was not allowed to have an animal in a house, even though we had lots of space, lots of unfinished rooms, and my puppy was not allowed to be there. And my dad, there were steps, and under the steps it was a little square meter space, like triangle space, and my dad would put a blanket there and would leave a puppy to be there. The puppy would, you know, for months and months, he would cry out loud. We couldn't sleep. That's how he was crying. And I begged my parents to let him into the house, but they never did, obviously. So basically, he was my best friend. We would go everywhere together. I would walk into the field. You know, he was always there. But suddenly, this puppy developed a sort of disease, and you know, strange. He had really, really strange skin, and he would often scrub a lot. To the point, and I asked my dad to take him to the vet, and I remember him saying several times that only rich people take their dogs to the vet because they don't know what to do with their money. Yes, that was his answer. And I could kill him just for that answer. Trust me. I have so many reasons to destroy his life. So many. But I'm not going to, okay? He would have to live with this tape and continuous ones. So, to the point where my beautiful dog would have scrubs all over his body. There was not a half an inch of empty space where the dog wouldn't have scrubs on his body. And it came to that point. I wasn't allowed to touch the dog. I wanted to hug the dog. I wanted to, make him feel better, but I wasn't allowed to touch the dog. And you know what he did one day? We had a hunter just up the road, about 70 meters up the road, 50 meters. And he would ask the hunter to shoot the dog. And I remember him dragging the dog to the field. And I was so unhappy because I couldn't go with the dog because I couldn't see him killed. And the dog kept looking back and looking after me, and I just started crying, and I would stand there. They went about 60, 70 meters to the edge of this field, and I could see that hunter with his gun, and I just heard the shot, and I just turned away, and I just started crying. He had an animal shot because he was too stingy to vet him, basically. I tell you how stingy he was. When I was younger than 12 years old, when I was still playing with dolls and things, I only had one doll. Only one. I wasn't allowed to have any others anymore because we didn't have enough money. Okay? They didn't have enough money for me. They had enough money for other children because every time we would go and see other families with children, he would buy them chocolates and toys and everything. He didn't have enough money for me. Me and my brother, he would have a teddy bear and I would have this baby doll. That's all I had. When I was older, when I self-learned how to sew, I would buy this book, How to Make Dolls, and I would make dolls from scratch. Yes, that was my childhood. Besides all the lies and shh, this stays in the family, don't say anything to anybody, that was my childhood. I feel pretty upset right now, and I would like to have some rest. So I would leave you with this, okay? I will continue in the next round how I formulated friendships with other kids. Okay, this is for the next time. How my parents control my friendships with other children. And I would go also into the sexual abuse I suffered. Okay, my parents don't believe me, but I will explain why they don't believe me now. Okay, so I shall love you and leave you. If you have narcissistic parents, please write to me. You will be told lots of lies from other people about me, but try and ignore them. They will probably even threaten you, okay? Try and ignore them. Stay in touch with me because I have so much to tell you. And this will lead into the state where I am now. I'm slowly building up to that, so you understand what's going up with me now better, okay? But with such parents, you can understand I couldn't function properly. I couldn't function as a child. I couldn't function as an adult, and that's the reason I had to escape to London to re-establish, to reinform myself. But for now, I love you and leave you. Stay true to yourself. If you feel that something is wrong with your life, it probably is. Okay, even if you can't prove it, trust your own gut. Okay, even if you have one friend, trust your own gut. You are your only friend. I will leave you with that thought and with much love. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next video. Lots of love.